My name's Arielle Dyment. I'm so excited that you all are here. I'm the founder of My Sober Compass, and I'd like to give a really warm welcome to Jen Elizabeth. She is going to be sharing about her book and her story today. She's an amazing author, and gosh, I'm so happy that we could connect on Instagram and meet each other, and now we're doing this live. I'm in Canada, she's in California. I would much rather be in California right now. But
Yeah,
so, is it warm right now?
dude, it's gorgeous. It's been like close to 90 the past few days. Yeah.
Yeah, once this COVID is lifted, I'm gonna take a trip down there again.
I'm telling you.
You picked the right place to live.
Yeah, I did. It's great.
Oh, I love it. Okay, so we got one more person coming in. All righty. So yeah, My Sober Compass, just for those of you who might not know who we are, we're a recovery coaching company that helps people build a sober lifestyle that makes sense for them. So with passion, purpose, and support. We do a lot of sober coaching. We're launching programs this year. I'd also like to introduce Erica Hudikoff, who is on Team My Sober Compass. You can follow her at Resonates Recovery on Instagram. She's amazing. She's one of my best, she's my go-to person, and I'm just so happy that she's here. She's going to be monitoring the chat. So right now, I would love to just keep everyone on mute for Jen's sharing portion, and then we'll open up the floor for Q&A. So if you have a question that pops up, definitely just type it into the chat and we'll go for it. So I would like to first point out that Jen's book, Shapeable Women, almost has a perfect score on Amazon. So amazing. And in this book, she essentially, you're going to talk all about it, but what really perked my ears up is that you talk about how we heal from pain that lives in our hearts. And this is definitely something that I've noticed working with clients. There's underlying pain, either from addiction, from past trauma. Pain is pain. But I'm really excited for you to share with the group about how you found relief from that and your story and your journey. So without further ado, I'm going to kick it over to Jen. Jen, the floor is yours.
Hello. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so sorry. I have the sun about to come down right here. So I'm turning into the angel of glowingness, which I am not. So yeah, I'm super excited to talk about my book, and pain and trauma is my jam, which sounds super weird, but healing from trauma has changed my life more than just getting into recovery from addiction. I pretty much, if you were to ask me, and people do ask me a lot, when I became a quote unquote addict, which I don't call myself that anymore, but when I fell into addiction, and actually my addiction is all about behaviors. And so those behaviors began when I was about 3. Ever since my very first memories, I have been disassociating, trying to escape pain, avoid my reality, shrink myself, swallow everything I was worthy of saying, all the things that really underline everything in addiction, right? That's what we're doing. We're trying to run from pain. We're trying to run from our feelings. We're insecure. We have shame. We hate ourselves. We hate our lives. So addiction tends to be the answer for that. So those feelings started when I was about 3. And, I was born into a home my mother is severely mentally ill. And it's not her fault, but it is not mine either. And she was very abusive, and there's a lot of addiction in my house. And so I kind of grew up in a lot of chaos and a lot of turmoil, and I was not ever allowed to talk about anything. So I would just lay in bed at night and wonder what was wrong with me. Why did mommy always want to kill herself? Why does mommy hate me so much? Why can't I be smart enough for her to love me? And all these things. And I don't think as children, we don't realize the magnitude of our silence. And this is like, you know, huge for me. And I think it's huge for people to really look at in their own lives, that the way we are shaped as children, it bears so heavily on the way we see ourselves as adults. And if we don't go back and travel back in time and really look at that and really face it and hold it, all we're doing is cutting off a weed and the root is still there. And so maybe we're sober, but I don't know about you guys, sober is not like the end all of end alls for me. You know, I want to be healing. I want to be free. I want to constantly be in motion, constantly getting better, more empowered, speak louder, stand taller. You know, sober is not the end of the road for me. That was the beginning of the road. So when I was about, you know, my parents were lost. They had no tools to live. They were, you know, it's just generations of trauma just cycling themselves through. And so they joined a religious cult, and they were looking for answers, looking for, I think, someone and a organization to help them. So we traveled and across the country and lived in a commune. And I think it started off probably with good intentions, with, you know, pure hearts of people wanting to live in a more, you know, God-fearing environment, raise their children in a wholesome land, all this stuff. But, you know, over time, it became very abusive, spiritually, financially, physically. And I came from a home that, you know, I was starving for love. I was begging anybody to see me. I wanted attention. I just wanted someone to notice me, to hug me, to tell me I was good. And one day an elder of this cult, and it was a cult, it was disbanded as a documented cult. So it wasn't a church. I sometimes say the word church, but I don't want to give anybody that possibly goes to a great church a bad name. This was a cult. An elder called me into his office, and he started coloring with me and singing me songs. And he told me that I was smart and that God loved me and all the things that I was so desperate for at home. And I felt so happy, and I felt so like honored and relieved to hear that stuff, and relieved to have somebody show me attention. And, you know, over time it just grew, and I don't want to be triggering, but, you know, that man ended up molesting me until I was 10 when we escaped the cult. And I never told anybody. I had been a groomed secret keeper, not even from him, from my family. All the chaos that went on in my house, we were told and shown that when you leave the house, you don't say anything about any of it. You protect the mess at all costs. And so I just carried that on throughout my whole life. My whole life has been about keeping secrets and hiding the mess and pretending I'm fine. And inside I'm fucking dying. And I'm hating myself. And I'm getting eating disorders by the age of 7. And I'm having nightmares. And I'm starting to harm myself and all this stuff. And nobody notices because so much is going on in the house. And that's why it's so important to me to talk about, you know, all this mommy needs wine stuff and all this stuff going on, because all that does is it leaves children unattended. And nobody's noticing if your child is struggling and scared about what's going on with this COVID stuff, or what's going on at school, or bullies, or nobody's noticing. And children that don't get noticed, they slip. And they slip between the cracks until shit's real bad, you know? And so we finally fled that cult. And I thought, my 10-year-old brain, that, and I thought I was pretty smart at that point. I thought that if I leave there, then it's over. Then it's done. Thank God, it's over, and I don't have to think about it ever again. Clearly, that is not the case. because we moved and my eating disorders just escalated. I was chewing food and spitting it out before I would swallow it. I just wanted some control, I think. I had no control over my home life. I had no control over whether I'd come home in the day and my mom would be missing and the police looking for her because she had going to try to kill herself again. I had no control over my body. I thought that I was born to just give my body to whoever may ask for it. I just had no control over anything. So I craved control, no matter how awful that control was. And I became suicidal, started fantasizing, and probably very close to falling into my mom's footsteps. And I found vodka when I was 12. And, it's maybe a strange thing to say, maybe not, but I believe alcohol and drugs saved my life at one point in time. I definitely, almost positively can tell you I would not be alive today. I would have killed myself, or at least tried. And I was a alcoholic by the first sip, before that little glass was halfway through, because I remember sitting there and I started scheming and planning in my mind of how I was going to get more and drink for the rest of my life every single day, because it was the first peace I had ever known. It was the first moment that the voices of hating myself were quieted. And all this, I'm not worthy, and all the memories just went away. They just silenced. And so I did that. I drank as much as a 12-year-old can find alcohol, but I obsessed on it. And so I really believe alcoholism, or any type of addiction, is not necessarily about how much you drink or use. It's about the obsession. And I obsessed 24/7. Anywhere I was looking for alcohol somewhere. And then, like probably most people's stories, I started hanging out with the wrong kids in school, in high school. And I didn't want to just drink on the weekends. I wanted to free myself of this pain every day and all day. So I searched out the kids that were doing harder drugs. And eventually, over time, in about my 20s, I was a full-blown, just drinking morning to night, the shakes and all that stuff if I didn't have alcohol. And I had to have a wisdom tooth pulled, and they gave me Vicodin. And I'm telling you, opiates took my life like a thief in a night. Any little thing I had managed to salvage or hold on to in my alcoholism was gone. I had every wisdom tooth pulled one at a time so I could get a prescription for each time. I had so many procedures I didn't need done. I doctor shopped and ER hopped. And I found I was, lost my apartment, and I was staying at different apartment, flop houses or whatever. And at one point, I ran out of pills. And if anyone on here has, been through that experience of opiate addiction and withdrawal, it is fucking horrendous. And I was laying on the couch and I was so desperate. And the guy said he had someone coming to help me, and I assumed that he had pills. But he showed up with heroin and a needle. And at that point, A, I'm super sick and super desperate, and B, I don't give a shit about myself. And so I didn't think twice. I just put my arm out. And from that point on, I was an IV heroin user, also used meth, and I did that for almost 15 years. And I have been the homeless person you see under the bridge. I spent about a year in psychosis, talking to myself, walking the streets. I used to eat from garbage cans. I lived in motels and cars and, you name it. And in and out of jail, oh my God, more times than I can even care to tell you. And that's the thing with trauma, and that's kind of like something that I really talk a lot about, is because the trauma loop, it kind of repeats itself, especially when it comes to addiction. It's like, it's pretty, like, studies have shown that trauma increases the likelihood of becoming, or falling into substance use disorder. And then SUD puts us into situations where we're more likely to be re-traumatized. We're hanging around dangerous people, we're in dangerous environments. And then studies also show that addiction to drugs and alcohol makes us less resilient to more trauma. So it's like this never-ending loop of my childhood trauma, being re-traumatized, unable to deal with it. Childhood trauma, re-traumatized, unable to deal with it. And this loop has played out through my life, my entire life, just on continually. And when I finally, the courts got sick of me and I was sentenced to prison. And I served a little over 2 years in prison, which is an experience. But about halfway through my sentence, I had, whatever God or higher power, or, the universe you believe in, but I had a divine intervention. I had no intentions of ever getting sober. I really thought that life was not possible for someone like me. And I was sitting in my cell and I was looking out this little window at this like small patch of grass that all the inmates used to walk around. And for a second, like all the sound just like left the room, like just silence for a second. And I heard these words, or I felt them, and it said, "This is your life." And I was 34 and I had nothing. At 34, I had nothing. I had no friends. I had nothing to show for myself. I owned no possessions. I didn't even own a shirt. I had to relearn to read. I had lost the ability to read from my drug use. I had track marks and scars from abscesses all over my body. And it finally hit me that was going to be the sum total of my life before my addiction finally took my life away if I didn't do something. And like this teeny tiny spark, it was so small, this tiny spark like ignited inside my heart that finally believed just a little bit that maybe I was worth more than dying like that. That maybe I'm worth a little bit more than overdosing in a riverbed alone as a transient whose identification was pending. And that is the reality of where my trauma, pain, and addiction, I don't even know how that didn't happen to me. I literally, every day, I have moments of just incredible, like, gratitude is not even a strong enough word, that I just cannot believe that I'm alive today. I literally can't. It just makes no logical sense, which is why I think there was something bigger out there, because I don't know how I'm here, but I am. So that is my recovery date, which is May 1st, 2011. So I'll be having 9 years next week. Woo, woo. Yeah, so I stopped using and drinking in prison on that day. But the longer I went sober, so it took about a year, a little bit over a year to be released from prison. The longer I was sober, the more pain started coming. All the things that I was running from just started seeping up, and the nightmares came back, and the panic attacks, and all these things that about 2 years in, and I did do the 12 steps, and I think there's multiple pathways to recovery, and I love them all. And I thought that drugs and alcohol were my problem. So like, if I could just get rid of those things, I should be fixed, right? I mean, they're the ones that caused me to be homeless. They're the ones that sent me to prison. They're the ones that gave me all these sores and wounds and scars and rape and all these things. So that must be the problem, right? So I focused on that, which is really important to get clean and sober or whatever. But I didn't deal with, nor did I even realize the weight of my childhood or all the things that had happened to me as a little girl, how they affected who I saw in the mirror. So about 2 years in recovery, I started fantasizing about killing myself again. I thought, if this is what recovery is, if this is what life in sobriety is, I'd rather die. It was just too much. And I just, something in me just said, just try one more fucking time. Just try one more thing. Just give it one more shot before you give it up. And so I started researching about sexual abuse. I still felt very much that it was my fault. I took a lot of ownership over that because I never told anybody about it. And I started researching about trauma and trauma recovery and inner child work and all these different avenues. And a light bulb just went on that, holy fuck, I'm like, there's this huge gap of silence and addiction in the addiction recovery community about a ginormous group of people. I mean, so many of us got into addiction or chose addiction out of a trauma response. Addiction is something that we fell into because we were running from mental health issues, childhood abuse, domestic violence, rape, all these different things that are trauma. Trauma, the opposite of trauma is choice. So anything that we've ever been through where we were not in control, whether that be what happened to us, what happened around us, and our brains cannot process it fast enough, it gets stuck in the body. And those body responses and CPTSD and all that stuff, I'm here to tell you, you cannot 12-step your way out of trauma. It's not designed for that. You can't celebrate recovery, smart recovery, refuge recovery your way out of healing. It will not heal your body. That's an entirely different treatment. So I started investigating that. I started really looking into it, finding communities that are healing from trauma. I reached out to a therapist. I started doing EMDR therapy. I did not feel wonderful overnight, don't get me wrong. It took a couple years. It took a couple painful years, but it's like I had a direction. I finally had some answers for why am I in so much pain? Am I doing recovery wrong? Am I working the steps wrong? I wasn't doing anything wrong. I just wasn't doing what I needed, what I deserved, which was adding in more tools. Like my toolbox today is fucking gigantic. And I think that everybody should have a big toolbox and add in whatever they need. Like if you're in recovery or you're sober or whatever, and you're working your program, whatever program that may be, to the best of your ability, but you are having so much pain and there's nightmares or there's panic attacks or anxiety. And true, there is people that have anxiety disorders. But if you look back at your life and you see that there's maybe some situations, experiences where you were out of control, especially as children, or in your addiction. And addiction in itself is a traumatic experience. Whether you believe we choose addiction or not, once you're in addiction, your freedom of choice is gone. So everything that happens to your body, everything that happens in that experience, where either, just the fact that we cannot function without having to take something, you have lost the power to choose. The people we're around, there's lots of violence and criminals and domestic abuse and rape and crime and jail. Being incarcerated is a traumatic experience. All these things are traumatic experiences. We each process trauma differently. And so I really think that every single one of us, we have this opportunity to have a beautiful life. And so if you just stick in the box, which is something that I really hate so much, is when we box ourselves in to one thing or two things, and we just think this is as good as it gets, and our whole lives pass by like that. And there's no such thing as good as it gets in recovery. There just isn't. It always gets better. It can always get fuller and freer and bigger and brighter. And we learn to, you know, like I said earlier, we learn to speak louder and sit in our truths and all these things, and heal our inner child and reparent ourselves. And all these things are so available to us. So I don't know, that's pretty much my get down. I get real excited when I talk about trauma, because it's like that was everything that destroyed me. And now healing from it is everything that has built me to be who I am. And like all that pain I was running from, I was so afraid to look at it. I thought I couldn't even look at that stuff. But little did I know that in that pain was the gold. In that pain was the power to change my life. It was right there the whole time. But I thought looking at it, you know, verbalizing it, saying it out loud would kill me, would absolutely kill me. But what almost killed me, and I'm surprised didn't, was running from it. So if anybody has any questions, or if you have questions,
I love everything you just said. First of all, I just want to say thank you for being so open and vulnerable and honest. Like, this is what recovery is freaking all about, right? For us to get in here and share the truth. And I wrote down a lot of kind of questions for you, but I would like to ask people, if you have a question, you can put it in the chat and we'll be asking Jen. But a big question that I have is, can you talk a bit more about some of the key resources that you found dealing with your pain? Like you mentioned EMDR. I'm sure there's lots of people on here that don't know what that is, and just talk a bit about those tools that you learned.
Yeah. So it's super important, if you are questioning the possibility that maybe you have some unresolved trauma that you have not addressed, or that you'd like to investigate, or that you find a trauma-informed and a trauma-trained therapist. Amazingly, not all therapists are trauma-informed. That is super, super, super important. If you go to a therapist that is not trauma-informed or trauma-trained, what they do usually is diagnose you with a disorder. And a lot of times, disorders are misdiagnosed as unresolved trauma. Not always, but this is just, you know, a lot of studies have been done. So that's number one. EMDR, and if I literally, my brain went blank on what EMDR stands for. Eye movement desensitization. I don't remember.
I think it's rapid eye movement desensitization, or something like
that. So EMDR therapy is something you need to do with a therapist. A lot of the healing work I do, it's called self-healing. So a lot of the healing work I do with myself, for myself, with communities of people that are doing the same healing work. EMDR therapy is something you need to do with a therapist. It is life-changing, completely life-changing. I highly, highly, highly recommend it. There's also microcurrent neurofeedback, which I do that as well occasionally. That also helps heal the nervous system. Trauma is stored in your body. And so that's why you have to heal your body. You have to heal the way, you know, the stress and all that stuff, and the nightmares and the hypervigilance and hyperarousal and all that stuff is just trauma in your body. So I also do inner child work, inner child healing, inner child meditation. Every day I actually do this meditation where I take a picture of myself. Usually at about 5 years old, when my pain really, when I started to being molested, and just all the silence and all this. So I look at this picture of myself as a little girl, and I close my eyes and I envision myself walking over to the corner and picking that little girl up off the floor. And I twirl her around in the sunshine, and I tell her she is love and light and perfect, and that none of that was her fault, and that she does not have to carry those burdens anymore, and that together we are safe to walk through anything that we need to. And I do this every day. And so what's happening is, all this inner child work I'm doing, over time, it's almost as if I'm re-raising myself, and the woman I am today is being raised by the heart of the woman I am, versus having been raised by the abusive parents that I was. It's just amazing how all this stuff works, you know? And I promise you, you know, I used to think that I was just so dirty and damaged that if I could not even share this stuff with anybody, because if they knew what I had done, if they knew what I had been through, they would look at me differently forever, and I was disgusting and all this stuff. So I started just Googling. I would just Google cults, or I would Google, you know, child abuse or sexual abuse, or, you know, I used to have nightmares where I was sexually abusing other children, and it destroyed me. And I thought there was something so wrong with me. I almost didn't have children because of this. I thought I was going to be a child molester. That's what happens. I didn't want to hurt anybody else. And I could never tell anybody that, for sure, right? I mean, oh my God, I must be the one and only one in the world that has done this. And that just must mean I'm doomed to be a child molester. And oh my God, I'm a monster. And I Googled that. And what I found out is that this is a very common trauma response from people who have been molested as children. And I'm like, holy shit, I'm not a monster. I'm not alone. Like, that Me Too is so like monumental in recovery and healing from anything, to know that you are not the only one. And I promise you that if you Google or go on Facebook or go on Instagram and type in the words that you're just too afraid to say, you will find communities of people healing from that exact thing. I have a huge mother wound. Mother wound is a word that I did not even know existed. I thought I'm supposed to love my mother no matter what my mother has done to me, because she's the only woman that will ever, she's my only mother, right? Well, that's false. And I do love my mother, but I also need to heal from that. And so I typed in mother wound, and holy shit, there's a whole bunch of communities of women healing from abusive mothers, or narcissistic mothers, or, you know, mothers in addiction, whatever it happens to be. And oh my gosh, I just started like reading the comments like anonymously, real quietly, you know, and going, oh my God, I feel that way too. Oh my God, that's my mother. I'm not alone. And like, I'm so grateful I didn't kill myself in recovery. I'm so grateful that I gave myself one more shot, that I just thought, maybe I still have something, there's something left in me worth saving. Because nothing I've ever been through is just, I'm on my own. Nothing is like rare. Nothing is, you know, too damaged or too dirty. Like, there's just so many people out there that are doing healing work. And I just highly, highly, highly recommend reaching outside of the box. And sometimes you're not met with like the most supportive people when you're inside that box, and that's okay. You don't have to be. You don't have to worry. You know, I had lots of people tell me, oh my God, you can't leave the 12 steps because then you're going to relapse. You know, and you don't have to leave anywhere either. You can add in other stuff. In my opinion, you can work the 12 steps, the SMART recovery, the Celebrate recovery, the Refuge recovery, EMDR, meditation. You can do it all at the same freaking time and get yourself fed wherever you need to be fed, because you're the one who's living your life. You're the one who has to live in your body every day. Nobody else, not your sponsor, not your friends, not your family, not your mother, not your children, nobody else but you. And, it's unfortunate, but that's kind of why, I found such a passion for harm reduction, because I spent a lot of years in traditional recovery, being very closed-minded and being, it had to be this way or no way, this way or die, and as long as you were willing to get sober, I was willing to help you. But until then, you go out and do your thing, and hopefully you don't die. And when you're finished, when you've hit your bottom, then come back to me. And I cannot do that anymore, because I remember what it was like to not even know what I'd be fighting for anyways. Because I remember what it's like to be in so much pain that addiction and the drugs and the alcohol was actually saving me from killing myself. So harm reduction meets people where they're at now. Traditional recovery says, we will help you when you're ready to come do it our way. Harm reduction says, we will help you now. We love you now. You matter now. No matter what your decision for the future about your drug use is, your life is worth something now. And a lot of times, and I was one, big time, who thought harm reduction was just enabling addiction. You're just giving people the tools to continue using. I'm here to tell you that I had no harm reduction policies in my addiction. And I continued to use like a savage. And I think most people use no matter what. And I was still worth the same that I am right now back then. I wasn't worth any less. Using under a bridge, talking to myself, peeing on the sand was worth exactly the amount of everything that I am worth right now sitting on this podcast with you, period. So it's been a relief for me to really dive into harm reduction. It feels so good to just meet people and say, I love you right now, and not have to have this big thing looming over my head about they have to want to get sober first, and the truth is that love, I hate the word cure. People always go, well, love doesn't cure addiction. Well, nothing cures anything, really. I mean, in medical terms, we're not talking about we're talking about spiritual, emotional wounds here. But love heals, and love plants a seed that people will never forget. No matter what they do with that seed, love plants a seed. And when someone comes to a harm reduction center and they want clean needles, you have no idea the magnitude of that self-care. You have no idea what that means for somebody, and how that gives them one extra step to say they're worth a little bit more than a dirty needle. They're worth a little bit more than this, and those little steps and those hugs and that food, and there's counseling services offered, and there is recovery treatment offered. And the goal for everybody, of course, and everyone hearts of heart, would be that everybody's sober. Everybody in the world's sober. Nobody uses drugs and alcohol ever again. But reality is, that's not going to happen, because there's always going to be pain, unfortunately. There's always going to be trauma. There's always going to be abuse and neglect, unfortunately. And as long as drugs are around, they've been around for freaking ever, I think people are always going to go to them. But are those people just like, once they do that, are they just worth dying or getting diseases or spreading that no, they're not. They're worth healthcare and rights. Not everybody in that box I was in agrees with that either, but that's okay. Because I'm not here to, I don't want to be on my knees begging for people to approve of me anymore. I did that. I lived that shit my whole life, on my knees, begging for scraps of love. I am done. Done. Stick a fork in me. I'm done. So yeah, there's my spiel on that.
Well, I want to say that I love bringing up the box. Like, I get lots of comments on the My Sober Compass page about, okay, 12 steps are the only way, or my program's the only way, or this and that. And my view is very much like yours in that everyone has to find their own way into recovery or it won't work, right? And if there was a perfect program out there, great, but there isn't, because I think what you wrote about in your book and your story speaks a lot to this. Yes, we can go through the 12 steps, for example, and we can get that spiritual awakening, the spiritual healing, deal with our resentments, but that doesn't cover the trauma. So I love that you brought this up, because I think there are a lot of people that do suffer when they get into recovery or they get sober or they make massive change, because it's like, well, what now? Is this the end of the road? Am I always going to feel like this? And that's when picking up starts to look attractive again. It starts to become easier. The thoughts start to swirl, and it doesn't surprise me. So for someone that, actually, I have a question that someone posted. What if a person knows that they need help, but ego is too large to seek it? What would you say? What's your opinion on this?
I think, I mean, obviously we're speaking like hypothetically, asking for a friend.
Yeah,
Asking for a friend. The fact, if you're not asking for a friend, the fact that you actually ask that and acknowledge that the ego is whatever, tells me that the ego is not as big as you think it is. And ego is just a protection. That's all the ego is. The ego is there to protect us from harm. So the ego is not always a bad thing. People talk about ego meaning like, you think you're better than everybody or whatever. That's actually not what ego is. Ego is actually a trauma response. It actually has protected us from perceived harm, perceived, ridicule, shame, all that stuff. You can reach out. That's the best thing about being online, and there's lots of bad stuff we could say about being online, and I love face-to-face therapy. I love face-to-face connection, communities, super important, right? But what's really great about all these tools we have available to us right now online is that you don't even have to show your ego. Your ego can hide itself and be protected, and everything's fine, and you can anonymously reach out and ask questions. And sometimes just that little step forward, sometimes just the question you just asked right now, it's like that little tiny step forward to say, hey, maybe there's something there. Or, hey, maybe what I already know I went through, maybe that affected me more than I realize. Or maybe I want something better in my life and I want to feel better. So I'm going to do this or look into that. I don't know. I think the fact that, even acknowledging that, hey, I know there's been pain. Hey, I know there's been abuse or this or that, but I'm just too freaked out to ask. Just that, like, acknowledgement tells me that you're almost there.
Yeah, and what you're saying is really speaking to me personally, because I think my ego or this facade that I had painted, like when I got to treatment, they started talking about all the different masks that we wear. It's like, holy shit, I'm wearing like 10, 20, 30 in an hour to cover up this pain that's inside. But who am I when I take the mask off? Like, if you take my job away, who am I? If you take my family away, who am I? And I'm curious, like, did you have is this something that came up for you in your journey as well?
Oh, that's something I have to reassess constantly anyways. Yeah, for sure. Because I think we all, and that's probably when I'm about to get so bright. Watch. Woo, God, I'm trying to block this light. My arm is going to be so muscular.
You're a star. It's okay.
I have overdue bills. Okay. Right here in the sun. It's like, oh my God, it's freaking killing me. Yeah, I think that's why like this whole isolation and being stuck at home is really hard for people, because we are face to face with that person without a lot of the things we use as our identities, right? Work, friends, going out, shopping, all these things we use to mask pain or discomfort. A lot of them have been stripped away. And so I constantly have to, like, you know, what is my, who am I? What is my identity? You know, who am I without anything else? And a lot of times that's a scary question. A lot of times, you know, that's kind of why I fight so hard to not to check myself and make sure I'm not begging for people's approval, because their approval will do nothing for me when it's gone, right? It feels good, or, you know, whatever at the moment, but when it's gone, then who am I? And then what, you know, I have no self-worth, no value to myself. Yeah, I'm always checking the mask, and nobody's healed. There's another one. No one is healed. Everybody is healing. Healing never freaking ends. There is no end of the road. So I am not healed. I'm healing, and I'm going to be on this journey for the rest of my life. This whole thing with the COVID thing and all this, you know, crisis and stuff going on brought a lot of my old trauma up. I had to go way back to basics. I started getting nightmares again. You know, this thing is a journey. It is always a journey. The great part is that from experience, know that whenever I feel discomfort or pain, ooh, that's where something good's at. That's where the fucking gold is. Now I just got to face it. I got to get in there. I got to sit with it. And then I'll be even more free when I'm moved through it, you know? And B is that I have tools now. I don't really, nothing has ever come up in a long, long time that I felt frozen over. Like, shit, what do I do? And so that's what continuing on the healing journey does, is that you gather all these extra tools. And so when something comes up, you know exactly where to grab. And just having those tools and just having those steps forward makes things so much better. You know, it really takes away that, you know, panic. Because, you know, it might be painful, it might be uncomfortable, but, you know, okay, if I do this and this, I've been proven, it's been shown that I will get through this, you know? I don't know.
I will ask a follow-up question to that, because sorry, I know you can't. I think so. Trauma is something that I brought into my world almost 2 years ago now, and it's really made a difference for me as well. And I have to, sometimes my therapist has to tell me, okay, this is a trauma response, Arielle. You realize when this person calls you and you go in a ball on the couch because it's hard to deal with, that's a trauma response, right? And it's an old one. It's someone that's been in my life for a really long time. We've got a history, yada, yada. And it really made me kind of look at, okay, how I respond to certain situations, certain people, certain things. What kind of, like, in your world, in your journey, have you had different traumas pop up different ways? I mean, you talked about eating disorder, then alcohol, then heroin and meth, you know. What are some other signs of trauma, in your opinion, that people could look out for?
Disassociation is one. And disassociation has many, many levels to it. It does not always mean drifting off above your body. It can mean zoning out, spacing out, losing little patches of time, going numb, feeling nothing. Those are all pretty common trauma responses. Shopping, spending money, having, you know, being promiscuous, perhaps. A lot of times there's love addiction, sex addictions, all that stuff. What's another good one? Nightmares, trouble sleeping, anxiety, sweating, feeling very hypervigilant. Sometimes what people consider OCD is actually a trauma response of you trying to have some control over not having any control over your insides. So we try to keep everything's got to be in order. Super jumpy. That's when I have big time a hyper arousal. Like even to this day, if someone walks into the room, I jump. If you walk up behind me, I jump. My kids, I have a 2-year-old and a 7-year-old, okay? Very small children. They walk in the room and say, Mom, I'm like, you know, they laugh at me about it, but that is a trauma response. That is something that is stuck with me. That is super common. Trouble watching certain things on TV. I have a super hard time watching certain things on TV. Smells, gosh, there's so many. But, you know, it's not just alcohol and drugs, you know. There's shopping and spending money and overworking. And there's so many that people consider harmless, you know, and people consider alcohol harmless because it's not illegal, I guess, which is a fucking bullshit, because self-isolation, that's a great one. I just saw that in the comment. Alcohol is super deadly, super damaging. Just because it's legal, don't buy into that bullshit. I think that's all I could think of, but there's so many.
There's a lot of good ones. I think you covered it. Honestly, I'm impressed. Like
I've had them all. So
and have decreased, like, you know, over time. So if you're operating up here, now that you're doing all these different things like EMDR, working different tools, like, do you feel like it's lessened by what percent, or how much better do you feel now after working up? Essentially, it sounds like a program of healing from trauma.
That's exactly what it is. It is a program of trauma recovery, is a program that is tailored specifically to you, which is why I think everybody in addiction recovery needs trauma recovery. Every single person, every single one. It doesn't matter if you've come from a damaging childhood. It doesn't even matter. The addiction experience does wreak havoc on your body. Just that experience alone. Your body not being able to function properly without a substance, and you have no control over that except to drink or use, no matter what negative shit is going on in your life, is traumatizing, period. Everybody should have trauma recovery to some degree. Obviously, when you come from, you know, sexual abuse and rape and domestic violence and narcissistic exes and narcissistic parents and all this stuff, it widens, it deepens, but it is a program that it's an ongoing thing. Like I said, you're never healed, you're always healing. So I feel, I can't even tell you how much better, I can't even put into words how free I am today compared to where I came from in recovery. So let's not even talk about under the bridge. Let's not even talk about when I was at the cult. Let's talk about in recovery, 2-3 years in recovery. Compared to how I felt then, it is like I'm an entirely different woman. Entirely. Do I still have trauma? Yes. Will I always have trauma? Yes. Is trauma a handicap? No. In fact, trauma is what makes me extra sensitive and extra empathetic. And that gives me more capacity and more compassion to love people who need to be loved the most. Trauma gives me creativity. It helps me be a better writer, be a better communicator. I think trauma has enabled me to be a more loving mother. There are so many gifts that through the healing process, I have learned to turn all that negative shit around. And it actually, maybe I did get into recovery to be different, but I'm not in recovery to be a different person. I'm in recovery to learn from everything that broke me. I'm in recovery to build myself up from all those wounds. They have built me to be who I am today. I'm not different. I didn't want to I don't discard a single bit of it. I don't want to forget it. I don't want to move on. You know, that is what has built me to be who I am today. So trauma will always be with me. It is a part of my life. There is, you know, you cannot go back and change it. And I have gotten to a point where I would not change a single thing that has ever happened to me ever. Because without even 1 minute of all those things, I might be different, and I don't want to be different than I am right now. So that's,
yeah,
and that's
I want to just like throw my hands up in the air.
Say hallelujah.
A big hallelujah. Like, honestly, it's so refreshing to hear someone talk, like to hear you talk about this, right? Like, yes, bless your heart. I agree. Like, let's get at it. I mean, our experiences shape who we are, regardless of if it's good or bad. I mean, and you've been through a lot: childhood sexual abuse, dealing with mentally ill mother, you know, all of the things. And I love that you're speaking about these things and you can write about it in a book and you can tell other people and people can learn from you. Like, this, it's really amazing. And how was it to write a book?
Yeah, it's hard. So it's really funny because, like I said earlier, that I actually lost the ability to read. So in my addiction, you guys, I don't know how I'm alive. Let's just, you know, I've said that already, but I used so much and lived in the underworld so long that they handed me a paper at intake when I was when I was just being arrested, right? I couldn't even put the letters together. It all just looked like jumble. I couldn't even put the letters together to make a word, the words together to make a sentence. It scared me. It scared me. I only knew the sign because I saw a line right there. And over time, I thought that was going to get better. And it actually, you know, in jail, everybody reads, right? There's nothing else to do. So I remember getting a book from the library and looking, and I couldn't fucking read. I mean, it just floated all around, you know, and I had to kind of reteach myself. And this is really funny, but in prison, they had hooked on phonics. So I did some.
They did? I love that.
Yeah, they did. So I did hooked on phonics a little bit, and my brain started to heal, and, you know, things started to come together. And so I slowly started to learn how to read. And then I had a journal in prison and I started writing a little bit. I still have it. It was like 3rd grade level. It was bad. But writing I started realizing the power of writing and the power of writing in your own handwriting with a pen and paper. And a lot of people don't write in pen and paper. Most people use their phones, their laptop. But in the healing community, and if you go to a therapist or whatever, a lot of them will tell you it is proven that it is so therapeutic to write with a pen and paper in your own handwriting. I'm not sure why that is, but I highly recommend it. So I started writing, and I started realizing that how much I was like kind of like working through stuff in my writing. So over the years in recovery, I'd have people, you know, after sharing my story, whether that be in a meeting or, you know, I slowly started sharing my story, you know, bits and pieces here and there. You know, it took me a while to really, and I really think it's more important to sit in your truth before you speak it anyways. If you start speaking stuff before you've actually sat with it and heal it, trust me, it can actually be super damaging. And you can be met with unloving people who do not want to hear about that. It makes them uncomfortable. They're in fear, whatever it is. So be very mindful. You know, speaking your truth does not mean shit. Sitting with your truth means everything. So they'd be like, you were in a cult, you should write a book. You know, that's like, everyone's fascinated with the cult story, because I guess maybe it's not super common, you know. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. So over time, I'm like, maybe I should tell my story, you know? And when I started telling my story a little bit on social media, you know, the times that I'd share something that I'm sure that everyone was just going to jump down my throat and tell me I'm horrible, you know, were the times that I got the most DMs from people saying, thank you for saying that. You just shared my story, or, you know, my mother was like that, or, you know, whatever it was. And I thought, maybe I'm onto something. Maybe people do need to hear about this. You know, what helped me so much is to know that I wasn't alone. So I'm going to pay it forward and show people that they're not alone either. And so I just started writing, and I had some writing already because I'm a big journaler. I love journaling. And I just kind of put it together, and it's not a super long book. And, you know, I have other books planned that will be part of that book. You know, the first book is Shapeable Women. It's basically an overview of my story. It touches on everything that we all talked about tonight. And it's about the fact that, yeah, we are shaped a certain way, but we are not bound to how we have been shaped. That we have the power to reshape ourselves from those great, you know, I've laid a lot of those girls to rest from my past, but I grow flowers from those graves, if that makes sense. You know, none of it was gone to waste on me. Everything is so valuable. And so there will be books to follow that will be just my addiction story. I didn't want to write an addiction memoir. Was not, and I'm not really a sober account on social media either. I'm more of a healing. I'm all about everything, you know. Getting sober was, like I said earlier, you know, it's not the end of the road. There's lots of sober accounts, which are so wonderful, that focus mainly on just sobriety. And I think that's so important. But I didn't really want to write an addiction memoir, because addiction was just a trauma response. It was just the way that I survived the shit that I was suffering from. So it's more important for me to talk about all that other stuff. You know, like my whole recovery is swimming underneath that surface of abstinence. You know, abstinence is like, you know, drugs, alcohol, heroin, you know, that's like 10% of recovery for me. The rest is all the shit underneath that drove me to that stuff. That's where like the real life-changing stuff is for me. And of course, when you first get into recovery, like I didn't know how to brush my teeth without heroin. I didn't know how to shower. I didn't know how to make a bed. Everything, addiction was seeping in every part of my body. So yeah, in the beginning, it's just about learning to function without using. But at some point, you got to move forward and expand. Expand is a better word, is expanding on all the reasons that got you there. And all, you know, all the things that you went through while you were there, and your relationships today, and, you know, abusive husbands and wives, and, you know, all this stuff that, you know, that stuff is either going to A, bring you to relapse, or B, make you miserable and sober. Personally, I'd rather die than be miserable and sober, personally. That's worse. Being miserable and in pain and sober is a fucking nightmare. And honestly, I don't know what's worse, is going back out and overdosing somewhere under a bridge, or being miserable in pain and sober. No, it's not necessary. It's just not necessary. This is such a beautiful time to get into recovery, to be in recovery, to start healing, you know, work, to continue healing work. There's just so much out there, and we know so much more today than we did back when the 12 steps were formulated, back when things first started. We know so much more. Like, you know, please do not box yourself into one thing. Just add a bunch of stuff in, you know, because everybody's life is possibilities. The possibilities are endless, you know. And I love people that use drugs. I love people that have had, my favorite people are the people that are, you know, either using drugs or in recovery from drugs. And alcohol is a drug, so forgive me, I don't even segregate the two, alcohol and drugs, whatever. you guys are my favorite people, man. You're the most empathetic, creative, loving, compassionate, intelligent, gifted people that, compared to normies, I'd much rather be with you guys. Like, there's a reason that we go there. Things hurt us more than they hurt other people. Things affect us more than they affect other people. That makes you like so gifted and compassionate and like such a blessing to this world and a blessing to my life, that I just hope everybody just, man, just gives themselves the gifts of all the healing that you can find and all the communities that you can find, and coaches and programs and podcasts and books and therapists and meditation, and there's trauma-informed yoga, everything. Like, go get it, people. Go and get it, because life is amazing. Life is amazing. And I'm, to be able to say that to you today, and I'm not lying, and I'm not bullshitting. I'm not trying to sell shit. Nobody go buy my book. It doesn't even fucking matter. Really. It really doesn't. And I was telling you, I'm the worst marketer. I'm the worst at selling this thing. I don't even give a shit. All I care about is that I plant a seed in you, that the girl that used to be homeless under a bridge, the girl that was in prison, the girl that talked to herself and couldn't read, is sitting here today and saying that life is beautiful. That's all you need to know. That's it. Right? And how many people are living examples of that?
It's tremendous what you're saying, and it's so true. And for people that are in like active addiction, let's say, it can be really hard to look over the fence and see what the other side could look like.
Mm-hmm.
How long would you say, like, when did you start to question, did it happen at once for you? Like, oh, maybe I should stop using to see what this could look like. Like, I know you talked about your moment in jail. Like, that's a big catalyst for change.
Yeah.
But had you debated it before?
No. Nope. No. There was no, I'll tell you, I never even thought about the alcohol and the drugs and what they were doing to my life. I just didn't want to feel. I was just running, man. Running as fast as I could from so much pain that I never even attempted to moderate, or I never did. You have to lock me up and take away every opportunity I have to get something to take away my pain. That's the truth. And when you get into prison, yeah, there is drugs and alcohol there, but it is not as plentiful as on the street. So it gave me time, of less, I wasn't strung out there. And so it did give me, I think, the clarity and a little bit of clarity. A little of the haze was gone, to where, yeah, I started to see that maybe life could be possible. And that's kind of like what I love about harm reduction, is because sure, people come in completely homeless and just like I was, snowed by drugs. It's very difficult to see straight, but they have a few minutes where someone is just loving them and caring for them no matter what. And it's like, it is a few minutes of clarity. It is a few minutes where things feel a little more normal than wandering the street searching for their next bag. And those little moments add up. And that's kind of what happened to me in prison, because yeah, I had that divine intervention, and that's the day that I stopped drinking and using. But I still had like over a year left in prison with no recovery. There was a few like NA or AA meetings that hardly ever showed up. So I was just hanging on to my ass, but I started getting little moments of clarity and little moments of, possibility for my life. And those add up, they do add up. So.
Well, yeah. And I think I agree. And I've noticed just society, don't kill an addict with kindness. Like there is kind of a divide here, because there's so many people that are so worried about enabling the ones that they love to continue using. And I get that, but I also see it from the other side, because I lived in addiction for so long, similar to you, in that it's lonely, it's fucking painful, like it's brutal in there. So where do we meet in the middle, right? With us being, when we're in addiction or when we're in early recovery, and then those outside that are kind of outsiders looking in, like, how can I help?
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. For one, the one word that's screaming out to me is boundaries. So obviously, okay, let's say, for example, you have a child that is suffering an addiction, and you're letting them stay in your house, and they're stealing from you, and they're causing so much havoc, abusive, whatever. Okay, because I believe that person needs a lot of love, and because instead of asking what's wrong with them, I ask what happened to them, does not mean that the people that are closest to that person should not protect themselves. That's why it's so important that we have communities to swoop up these people that have had to be, that their families have had to detach. You have to have boundaries. You have to protect your space, your other children, yourself. I think boundaries are super important. I don't like the word enabling. I don't understand it. I get it. I used to be that way. I used to think, you're enabling them to do this or that. And I think basically the reality is, if you kick them on the street, they're still going to do all that stuff. So I don't think you should feed them money so that they can go buy drugs and then abuse you. I think you need to set boundaries. But I think there needs to be communities of people that are there to help those people that are outside of the family unit or outside of the relationship unit. I just, you can't, love and all that stuff, like I said earlier, is not going to cure addiction. You can't give your kid money and food and a roof over their head and let them just come and go and all this stuff and abuse you and expect for that to help them,
Mm-hmm.
But that's why we're here. That's why there's communities of people that are not a part of that family unit. So you can have boundaries with love. Boundaries are not about against anybody else. Boundaries are for yourself. And when you set boundaries with love and stay strong about those boundaries, and then there needs to be people, communities of people that come in and help those people. And lots of people aren't ready to get sober. Lots of people. That's why it's important that there is harm reduction, because I know if it were my children and my children were using and they were not ready to stop using, I would want them to be as safe as possible so that hopefully they can live through this shit. Period. And that's why I'm activist for harm reduction, because people deserve to live. Because look at what happens to people when they do find recovery. They become coaches and therapists and writers and speakers and productive members of society and mothers and fathers. Like, the possibilities are endless. So let's keep them alive until then, please, because they're valuable. They're just as valuable as we are. I don't know if I went around that question.
No, you definitely answered it. And I think there is definitely a lot of confusion around harm reduction. Okay, like what
Yep.
does this mean? Does this mean that it's okay to use needles? That's the first thing people always bring up to me if I mention it, right? So
Right.
what would you say to someone who questions harm reduction in that practice? Like, how do you
Okay. So I get asked this a lot. So here's the thing. Harm reduction asks us to set aside the stigma surrounding addiction. And that's what we all want, which is interesting. Everybody in recovery wants to be a stigma fighter. Yet before you're in recovery, we want to throw stigma on those people and say they're lazy, they're this, they're trash, they don't deserve health care, they don't deserve rights, wait till they hit their bottom. leave them on the streets, all this stuff. But once we glowingly get our first day and our first chip or whatever, we want to be a stigma fighter. Well, harm reduction fights stigma for everybody from the gate, no matter what you want to do, no matter what your choices are. Harm reduction says that people are valuable and worthy of healthcare, no matter what. Clean needles and like, you know, safe injection sites and safe supply, which is very controversial, and all that stuff is a form of healthcare. Not only is it protecting that person, but it protects your whole entire community. Do you want somebody who has hepatitis or AIDS or in your McDonald's bathroom on the floor? Because they will be there. Or do you want to have safe injection sites where it's clean, it's sterile, there's somebody there watching to make sure somebody doesn't overdose? You know, it's just about caring for people, and nobody has less rights than anybody else, whether you're sober or not, period. And I just, you know, I don't think personally people are going to use drugs if they're going to use drugs, whether there's harm reduction there or not. They'll find a way. I'm proof of that. Many of us are proof of that. Harm reduction is not just about clean needles. It also offers lots of counseling, lots of therapy. There's lots of recovery meetings in there. There's also medication assisted recovery to help people. Their goal is not to just, oh, here, keep using. We love that you're using heroin. We just love it. No, we love you even though you use heroin. There's a difference. We don't support addiction or drug use. We support people who use drugs. There's a difference. It's about the person first. It should always be person first about anything. It doesn't matter if it's about drugs, if it's about violent, whatever it is, it should always be person first. This is why I don't call myself an addict anymore. Doesn't mean that I don't recognize that I can never fuck with anything ever again. Hello, I never can. But I am a person before I'm any of that. So I'm a person in recovery. That is what I say now today. Person first is super important. Words are important. The words we use, like substance abuse, that is, we can't, you know, that word is bad also, because the word abuse comes with lots of negative overtones. Anything that's being abused or is bad. Child abuse, animal abuse, anything abuse. So when you call substance abuse or alcohol abuse, you're automatically shading that person as a negative person. You know, these are things that people are just learning and just starting to see, and it may not affect it. It doesn't really matter to me if you say that you're an addict, and I don't see you any differently, but we're talking about people on the same playing field here. What it really matters is people in legislation. Where it really matters is people in healthcare, nurses, doctors who don't have this type of, we're not on the same level. So words that we use, behaviors that we do really affect the type of care that someone receives. It really affects the type of justice they get in the courts. These things matter because people matter over anything. People matter over their behaviors, period. So
yeah, and I think we put judgment aside. Like I even watch live PD now, you know, and I watch it differently than I did 10 years ago, because when they pick up people who are using drugs or they're drunk, my first thought is, wow, I feel bad for them, you know, like let's get them help, where that they're going to jail first thing. And it's still, I think the system is a bit broken. It's definitely improving, but there's massive stigma still. So I think we need more books like yours. We need more podcasts and more things talking about the actual solution. And you've made a difference for me just in this call, you know, and I think you have. It's really cool to be able to, even during COVID right now, for all of us here to show up and have this real talk discussion. I do have a question from someone. For someone newly in recovery who comes from sexual abuse and rape that has yet to process it, who does not have tools or know where to begin to even look, what is your advice for them entering into a healthy, intimate relationship?
Oh God, that's a tough one to enter into. It's very difficult to enter into a healthy, intimate relationship if you have not quite healed your relationship with yourself. That's scary to me. Because personally, speaking from my own experience and many, many, many others, I had the most unhealthy relationship with sex my entire life. I literally, and that's because I hadn't healed what had happened to me, all the things that had happened. If somebody's already in a relationship, if you're not in a relationship, don't do it. Don't, please, God, don't do it till you've worked on healing yourself. Healing yourself is the most important thing. Not only that, when we get into relationships that are based upon trauma, so our pickers are kind of broken, if you want to put it that way. So when we find people that we think we're attracted to, but we're picking off of trauma, unresolved trauma inside of ourselves, oftentimes what happens is when we start doing healing work, we look at that person, that's not even somebody that we would date as a healing person, right? So it's very difficult. But if you're already in a relationship, I mean, it's very hard to have a healthy, intimate relationship with somebody when your view of intimacy is so skewed and damaged. I would definitely, please God, suggest reaching out to a therapist or an online community first, or just Googling, like I said, and really being an advocate for yourself and what the possibilities can be. Because I'm here to tell you, I dated some fucking wrong people for me because I was trying to fill a void that I could have been filling by healing work that I just didn't know, you know. But once we know, we do better, right? So yeah, I would strongly suggest working on yourself first, or start working on yourself now. Probably if you're in a relationship, it's probably not benefiting yourself much, because I'm sure it's based on trauma responses, trauma bonds. Oh man, I could go on and on. Yeah.
Oh, follow-up question. Would that be a sex therapist or informed trauma therapist, or are they the same thing?
They are not the same thing, but I don't think you need necessarily a sex therapist. If you have childhood sexual abuse or rape, what you need is not a sex therapist. You need a trauma-informed therapist to work through child abuse. Yeah, first.
Okay. Yeah.
It's amazing what heals our sex, it's amazing what heals all that stuff when we deal with our childhood. That's why I always say, please travel back, keep traveling, travel back. There's most of the time something there. Even we can have, generally good parents, let's just say. But most of our parents are living from trauma from their, generational stuff. And trauma, like I said, doesn't have to be abuse. Sometimes it can be cultural stuff, like, your dad always said, you never do this, you never do that, you never wear shorts, and these things just get passed down and passed down and passed down. And so don't ever discount, oh, my dad was just really he just punished us kind of rough. Or don't ever discount something that may have affected you. It's not putting blame, it's not shaming, and nothing I do is about shaming my parents. I'm releasing my shame, and there's a difference. That shame will fuck you up. It will just destroy everything in your path. It will ruin everything that you have possibility, all the joy, all your relationships. It will just destroy everything. And it's not about blame. Oh, I blame my, the guy that sexually molested me. It's his fault I did heroin. No. But what happened is that experience traumatized me so much that I was in so much pain that I chose and reached for anything to relieve it, no matter what the consequences were. And so going back there and looking at that stuff, it's important. It's important. I mean, a lot of us come from trauma. I'm telling you that it's like 1 in a million people in addiction recovery today that have not had childhood trauma. It is so fucking rare. The link and the bridge is so ginormous. It's insane. You know, a lot of us had parents that were alcoholics, or, you know, mommy would pass out, and as a little kid, we'd try to wake her up. Maybe you don't think about that much, but as a little kid, that is fucking frightening. Or you don't know what daddy's going to be like when he gets home. Or, you know, whatever it is, there's all these little things that maybe we just, oh, that's not it. Oh, that's not it. Well, maybe it's not it as an adult, but these things that happen as children it's something that we cannot process, and we are not in control of. We have no control over what our parents do when we're kids at all. And that out of control feeling and that chaos and that fear, our bodies go into survival mode and they protect us. Our bodies are fascinating. It's just amazing what our brain and our bodies do to protect us from harm, from perceived harm, for perceived threats, you know, whether that be actual or just imagined, whatever. Please just always go back. I promise you, you'll find shit. I mean, I can almost guarantee you. And our parents had trauma. I mean, I think about my poor mother, and I think about her life today, and it is just so painful, her life. And it just, I wish that she could have decided to go a different route and decided to advocate for herself, or, you know, and to heal from all of the things, because she is just a wounded woman that, unfortunately, like that saying says, bleeds all over everybody around her. You know, if you don't heal your wounds, you're just going to bleed all over the people that you want to love. She just has no capacity. She has no tools to love herself or anybody else, including her children. Does that make her a bad person? No, it just makes her a sick person, a wounded person. And I today have to detach with love. I love my family. I mean, I love my mom so much it hurts, but I love myself and my children more. And so I have to protect myself, and that's where boundaries come in. You know, boundaries are not saying, Mom, you're bad, and I don't want to, you know, I can't, this is your behavior. And it just says, I love myself today. And so I'm going to protect my family and protect my future. And that is the same with people that are still using. And if you have children or a husband or whatever, and it's just too much for you, boundaries to protect yourself and protect your family and your future with love, you know? I don't know.
Connects really well actually with our next question. I think
Okay.
this will be the last one, because this is great. We've got lots. If you see someone drinking a lot, should the significant other say something or not say something?
Oh, I think if you're in a relationship with somebody and any type of behavior is problematic to you, you should always have open line of communication. It doesn't matter what it is. If you're with a partner that spends too much money, I mean, wouldn't you sit down and say, honey, we are going broke, or the finances, or, you know, or if you're with someone, you know, that isn't eating properly and they're starving themselves, and you could see, anytime you have any kind of a concern for somebody that you're in a relationship with, you should absolutely sit down and talk to that person. What matters is the approach. What if he gets angry and defensive? If he gets angry and defensive, then he probably has a problem with alcohol. And there's your answer. So really, what I don't really think, a lot of times we think if we just get him to say it, there's what we need. Well, what if he just tells you, yeah, I have a major problem with alcohol? Then what? I think what you have to do more is kind of discern in yourself what is acceptable to you and what isn't, because we can't change people. So all we can do is decide for ourselves our limits. What are our limits? Because no matter what answer he gives you, it's not going to, you know, he can say, no, I'm fine. Like, I'm sure he's probably already done a million times or whatever. Or you can say, yeah, I'm an absolute alcoholic and that's it. So what? Now what? Will you get off my back? Either way, the answer is, I think I think it just depends on how you confront it. If you confront it with love, and I think before you do that, you should definitely have limits set to yourself first. Really think about the limits. Like, okay, no matter what the answer is, it doesn't really matter, because is his drinking problematic to you? Is his behavior disrupting your life, perhaps your children's lives? Is he abusive? Is it just because it bugs you? Or is there an actual, negative stuff? But always from love, always from compassion, but always know your limits first, because no matter what, it doesn't really matter what he says. What matters is, what are you willing to continue to do? And then you know where to go from there. If there's boundaries, like, well, listen, this behavior is affecting me. I myself cannot find peace, or the kids, or I don't know the situation, but we really need to maybe discuss treatment, or what about, maybe we need to really discuss moderation, or I don't know. A lot of times I think it's up to the person to decide if they're ready to. The person has to decide if they're ready for recovery, but you get to decide what you're done with dealing with. Right? I'm saying it very matter of fact, and I know there's so many facets to that there's financial. It's not just as easy as saying, well, if you're not going to quit drinking, we're going to leave. Well, where are you going to go? Maybe you don't have an apartment. Maybe you don't have the finances to take care of yourself. There's so many facets, but a lot of times if we start focusing on ourselves, Al-Anon is a great thing. And those types of groups for people that have significant others in addiction, and alcoholism is addiction. So I say addiction a lot. Please know I mean alcohol as well. In addiction, or really start taking care of yourself and let him do what he's going to do. Because the only person you can control is yourself. The only person that you can change is yourself. The only person you can heal is yourself. If I could heal other people, I would have healed my mom. I would heal, my dad. We can't heal anybody else. All we can do is work on ourselves and show people what that looks like. That's it.
I love that. It's so simple. When we peel all the layers off, we got to worry about ourselves. And I think there is a lot of power, like you mentioned, Al-Anon, in working our own programs first. And then it's really quite amazing what happens at the other end, in like when we start healing, people step in or they step out. And I know it sounds kind of harsh, but I've experienced this with lots of relationships in my life. Step in or for me, I get to choose who's in my circle now. It's not just, oh, do you want to go get drunk? Well, you're going to be in my circle then.
Right?
And I think it's huge. And you brought up so many good points. The last question I want to ask, now that you're coming up to 9 years in recovery, hell yeah, that's fucking amazing. What are some of the gifts that recovery has brought you, life?
Really, like I could sit here. The gifts are endless. So obviously, I'm a mother today, which would not happen without recovery or my trauma healing. I have clarity to see what my life could be. I have, the clarity to see what the present, and I'm able to deal with my past. I have possibility today. Like, there is no limit. Addiction limited my life so much. I mean, my life became so tiny and small and like this big, even before prison. Sure, prison is like one cell, but even before that, my life was so small and dark, and I couldn't venture off much, because then what if I had always had to make sure I had enough to not be sick, enough drugs to not be sick, or I had to make sure that I had enough that I wouldn't start feeling, the memories from my childhood. And just, I was so ashamed and embarrassed, and, everyone looked at me weird, and I was stealing, and I was, nobody wanted me in their house. Nobody wanted me in their stores. I don't blame them. I was a mess. I have friends today, like real friends, like not friends that want to use me for drugs or that want me to go steal for them because I'm, crazy and nuts. Friends that I don't have to give anything to. Friends that I have family. I don't have my blood family, but I have family in my friendships. My friends are my family. And I have like communities of people that, I can share anything with, and they can share anything with me. And I have like real love. And the biggest thing, the biggest gift, and it's hard for me to differentiate between when we say recovery, if we're talking about, when I say recovery, I'm talking about addiction recovery and trauma recovery. So healing. Recovery for me is about healing all around the board. From addiction, all that's about healing. But the best gift I've been given from healing is the gift to know that I am worth something. And in my self-acceptance, I've learned how to love myself. And that is something that I never knew, ever in my entire life. I was not a toddler, 5-year-old, 7-year-old. I was not playing with toys and looking in the mirror and seeing a princess crown and a wand. I never had dreams. I hated myself. I don't remember ever not hating myself. So to be 43 and been through everything I've been through, and to tell you today, honestly, do I love everything about myself and I feel totally wonderful? Of course not. But do I know I'm worth every single bit of this life that anybody else is? Abso-fucking-lutely. That is the biggest gift I've been given. And once you know you're worth something, you're more apt to go out and do more. So that's probably the best one.
Abso-fucking-lutely.
Abso-fucking-lutely.
Well, I just want to say I abso-fucking-lutely appreciate you. I would love if you could tell the group and that are going to watch this video afterwards how to find you, like how to get connected with you and all that jazz.
Okay. So I'm everywhere on social media that you can find as Resurrection of Me. It's Resurrection with a K _of_me. That's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I think I have a Pinterest. I share my message everywhere, baby. Pinterest, the Pinterest moms, they get all about my trauma work. Everyone's on Pinterest looking how to decorate cakes, and here comes trauma, the trauma babe. Hey, but they need it.
They do.
And so I have a website that I just launched last week, but it's resurrectionofme.com. There's lots of press articles on there, lots of podcasts, different podcasts. And I don't tell the same thing on every one. I usually have different, there's lots of mother wound podcasts I've done, not my podcast, but I'm a guest. Some just dealing with my addiction story. Yeah, and then the book is Shape of a Woman on Amazon by Jen Elizabeth. That's it.
Perfect.
That's me.
Well, I love it. And if I will post all of the links after this,
okay.
Because I think it's really important for lots of people in recovery to get into trauma recovery. I mean,
huge,
mind-blowing, right?
Mind-blowing. Yep.
Talked about enough. So I'd love to invite you back in the future too. This is amazing. I want to say thank you for all that you shared about today. Your story is beautiful. I know there's a lot of pain in it, but you are a beautiful woman. You're strong, you're capable, you're amazing. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I hope everyone has a really good night. Jen, you as well in sunny California. And we will talk with you all soon.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.